Good morning. As Ed said, my name's Jason. I'm going to get to teach again today with you guys. I'm on staff here as a counselor and a pastor. And before we even get started, I just thought I'd like for you to just sort of ponder a question. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think about the answer. And the key word is think. Don't say it out loud. Okay? You'll see why in just a second. Here's the question I want you to think about. What makes you angry? Or more importantly, who makes you angry? See why I told you not to say it out loud? Some of y'all sitting with them right now, all right? But seriously, what is it that tends to trigger your anger most often? You know? We all have our things, right? Stuff that just gets on our nerves, we just don't like, and people that wind up aggravating us. We all have those. And the truth is, and the reason I told you not to say it out loud is because a lot of the times it's the things and the people who were the closest that trigger the most reaction out of us. And honestly, that tracks because we care more about them. The relationships are closer. We value the opinions of the people around us, and we want the best for the people around us. And so that's my more positive spin on why the people around us trigger our anger the most. But it really is true. We're more invested in those relationships. We care more, so they affect us more closely than other people do, of course. And I'm the same way. I'm not just a teacher on this. I'm also a partaker in anger as well. I mean, we all are to some degree. We all have the things that get on our nerves the most. I know for me, and I'm working on this stuff, so, give me some grace. But I always hate it when people blame me for something I didn't do. You get angry when people blame you for something you didn't do. I get really defensive if somebody brings me something that I didn't have anything to do with and they want to put the blame on me. They're questioning my motives. I hate it when people assume what I must be thinking or what I must be feeling, and they don't give me the benefit of the doubt, and they try to tell me what I think. I hate it when people expect me to read their mind. That drives me crazy. You ever somebody walk up to you and say something like this and say, "Hey, did you ever talk to her about that thing?" Oh, come on, you got to say more words than that. I mean, who's her? What's the thing? It just makes, that thing, and you just go, it happens to me. And like I said, I'm working on those things. I will get there one day, maybe. But we all have our things. We all have our situations. We all have our people that tend to make us the most angry the most often. And I don't know what yours is, but I bet for somebody in this room, it's your job right now. It's the boss that you work for. For some of you in this room, it's your best friend who's just driving you crazy. For some of you, it's your kid's teacher this year. What is she thinking, right? What are they doing? For some of you, it's an extended family member right now. For some of you, it's your parents or your kids or your husband, your wife. Now, apparently, for a lot of us in our society, it's cars. Who knew, right? We have a whole other section or a whole other category of anger called road rage. Because apparently, we can't handle other cars and what they do on the road while we're with them. And road rage is fun when you're watching videos on TikTok. Not so fun when you're in the middle of it, right? But we have rage over those kinds of things. Now, if you were here last week, you know that we're spending the next few weeks together looking at this topic of conflict. Arguments, fighting, all those kinds of things. And we want to figure out how can we navigate conflict according to the spirit and the way of Jesus. And the reason why that's our focus is, if you're new around here, at Community Christian, we have just proclaimed for us, Jesus is King. We believe he's King not just of us, but of the entire planet, the entire cosmos. He is in charge and he reigns, just like we just sang in that song. And so if that's true, if Jesus truly is King, then what we know that means is every part of our lives must also come underneath the reign of Jesus. He gets the say in my life, which means my job as his follower is to give my full allegiance, my whole life, to whatever he says. Whatever Jesus says, he's right about everything, and I go with him. I want to align myself with how he says the world works. And that includes how I deal with conflict whenever it comes up between myself and somebody else. I want to follow in the way of Jesus. And so last week we started with, well, really the most important question to start with when it comes to conflict. We asked this question: where do the fights and the quarrels and the arguments between people come from? And none of us liked the answer, if you remember, because we found out, where do the fights come from? They come from me. Who knew? They come from inside of me. Now, not all of it. There's part of it that doesn't, but for our purposes, the best way we can handle conflict is start by looking inward, because the reason I have conflict is simply this: there is something that I want that I'm not getting. Just curious, for those of you who were here last week, how many of you tried that little phrase I taught you on somebody that you were arguing with this week? Oh, somebody in the back gave it a shot. I hope that went well, or else it's gonna reflect poorly on me. Now, here's the question or the statement that we looked at. We said, we should say in the middle of all of our conflicts at some point, hey, you know what the problem is? Part of the problem is, don't you? I'm just not getting what I want. And the reason we start with that statement is because what it does is it causes me to get out of the accusation game, stop playing the blame game, stop pointing fingers, and look inward, reflect on what it is that I'm thinking, what it is that I'm feeling. The way Jesus put it was, he said, before you go and try to take the speck of sawdust out of your brother or sister's eye, why don't you start by looking at the plank that exists in your own eye? And that was just Jesus's exaggerated way of saying, look inward first. And the reason that's so important is because when you look inward before you go to confront or before you go to resolve conflict, it puts you in a place of wisdom about yourself and about the world, the way it works, and it puts you in a place of humility to understand that I don't know everything and I don't have it all figured out, and maybe there's something here that I can learn. And when I'm in a humble place, my posture changes about how I do conflict. And ultimately, here's where it leads. It puts us in the posture where we're actually able to love the one that we are in conflict with. And we know, as Jesus followers, the way of Jesus is always the way of love. Jesus called us to love those who persecute us, love those who are our enemies, love those we have conflict with. So if I'm going to do that, I must first turn inward. I must look at myself. I must humble myself to be wise in order to be able to love the people that I'm in conflict with. So today, we're going to spend a little bit of time on that question that I left you with, the question about anger. Anger is probably the most common emotion that surfaces when we find ourselves in conflict or at odds with other people. And I think the first thing that's real important to just say right up front, especially for us religious people, is this: anger is not a sin. Anger in and of itself, by itself, is not sinful. So we don't need to be treating it like that. We actually need to look at it for what it really is. What is anger? Anger is an emotion. Emotions are not sinful. They are signals. Maybe you want to write that down. Emotions are not sinful. They are signals. They are there to tell us something, and we should listen to our emotions and figure out what they are telling us. But anger, now, of course, it can lead us to sin, but it itself is not a sin. Anger can lead us to say things, to do things that harm other people and harm us, which by definition, that is what sin is. Whatever harms you or harms other people, that's sin. Anger can lead us to all those kinds of things. But just like any of our other emotions, we can sit with anger, we can listen to anger, and we can reflect and bring it underneath the lordship of Christ by his Spirit. And when we do that, anger actually can lead us to take healthy actions. Believe it or not, anger can lead you to love if you let it, but not until you harness it, control it, and bring it under the submission of Christ. And I want to talk to you about that towards the end today. But before we get there, we're going to look at a couple of places in Scripture where we are taught by God's word what is anger and how should we approach it in our lives. The first place we're going to stop is, of course, where we've been working for months now, in a letter written by the brother of Jesus. His name was James. He wrote to an early church in the first century. And here's what he says about anger. He says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, but slow to speak and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. Now, I want to point out two things that he says in this little passage. It's packed full of meaning, but two main things. First, he says, no one can do anger fast, not and do it right. Anger must always be done slowly. You cannot speed through this process. Anger requires care. It requires slowness. You cannot do anger fast. That's when we find ourselves moving away from love and going towards something else. That's when we say or we do something harmful or destructive. It's when we try to speed up our response or speed up our reactions to our anger, and we have to slow down. So that's the first thing. We must always do anger slowly. The second thing he points out is he makes a distinction that there are several, or at least two different kinds of anger, right? He says there is a type of anger that he calls human anger. And he says human anger does not lead toward the righteousness that God desires for us. Now, what is righteousness? Now, the word righteousness in the Greek can also be translated justice. It's a concept that simply just means this: right relationships, ordered, good, right relationships between people and between people and God. That's what it results in. So in other words, a right, ordered relationship between other people and between God cannot be brought about when you have human anger in the situation. Human anger leads us away from right relationships. But that assumes that there is an anger that will. And you could call that a godly anger. See, when you witness someone being hurt or mistreated or neglected or even abused, especially if that person is you, there's an anger that rises up within us, and it says to us, this is not right. This is not fair. This should not be. Someone should do something about this. And those feelings, if they lead you to take loving, supportive, constructive actions, to say loving, supportive, constructive things, this is what James would call godly anger. Anger that leads you to exit a hurtful or an abusive situation. That is godly anger. But anger when it's turned loose, anger without thinking, anger without restraint, fast anger, when it doesn't speak truth, when we resort to violence or coercion, well, that's human anger. And that's where it leads. It leads to sin, broken relationships. It will not bring about right relationships between us or between us and God. It will not bring righteousness or justice. Then the Apostle Paul later talks about anger in his letter to the Ephesians chapter 4. And he says this. He says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. And do not give the devil a foothold. Now, several things in this passage it's important to point out. First thing he says is, in your anger, don't sin. Now, that assumes some things. That assumes that, what we talked about earlier, anger is not a sin. There is a way for you to be angry and not sin. And in fact, it also assumes something. It assumes that we're all going to feel it. Like we said, it's an emotion. Everybody's going to feel anger from time to time. But if I am a follower of Jesus and I seek his way, I can be angry, but I must learn how to be. That is my task as a follower of Jesus. How do I be angry without sinning? Well, as we said before, one way is you got to slow down, first and foremost. But notice what else Paul stresses in these verses. He says, don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. Now, what does that mean? Well, I've heard a lot of people try to interpret this verse like a literal hard and fast rule. In fact, a lot of married couples talk to me about this. They go, look, we just follow that verse. We don't ever let the sun go down while we're still angry. Never go to bed angry. Never have a fight. Even if we have to stay up all night and fight it out, we are never going to bed angry. And I say to myself, I don't know if that's the best way to handle that. Staying up all night, fighting it out, really? Just so you don't go to bed angry? Because sometimes when you're angry, you know what you need more than anything else? You need a nap. You need some sleep. So maybe going to sleep is the best thing for your anger because you're just tired and you're just cranky and you need to rest. So what is he saying here? I don't think what Paul meant for us to take from this is to get a hard and fast rule that we can't go to bed angry. I think what he's trying to do is establish a principle to remember. Because remember, we need to be slow to anger, right? We need to slowly move through our anger, and we need to be careful about our response to anger. But here's the principle. Don't hold on too long now. Don't be so slow that anger sticks around. Don't nurse it. Don't feed it. Don't go get a whole bunch of other opinions from your best friend. You believe what she's doing? You know what he did? All that stuff. Don't do that, because if you go that slow through anger and you don't work through it, if you give it a place in your life, if it settles in, if it starts to grow and you don't do something about it, that's a dangerous place. And that's why Paul says in the next verse, he says, don't give the devil a foothold, because if you go too slow and you let it stick around in your heart and your mind too long, well, that's dangerous too. Because when we do that, it gives our enemy, who, by the way, wants to steal, kill, and destroy everything good God has for your life, you let anger stick around too long, you give him fertile ground to work in. See, unresolved, long-held anger, bitterness, grudges, some of y'all know this because you've lived them. It gives fertile ground for some really bad things in your life. It gives the devil a launching pad for destruction. Not just with you, but maybe even in the lives of the people that you're angry with. And see, one of the things I've found is, because I sit with angry people all the time. I mean, they wind up in a counselor's office like mine, and they always give me the reasons why they're angry. But the truth is, most of the time, they don't say it that way. I find that most people who are living in a perpetual state of anger honestly don't even know they're angry. They just assume that everybody in this world is messed up except me. It's a very self-focused way of viewing the world. And again, it doesn't require me to look inward and be humble. They just don't even know. And because they don't realize that that's what's going on, they don't think that their way of dealing and reacting to the people in the world is a big deal. They don't think it's a big deal for them or a big deal for anybody else. I just need everybody else to change. But the truth is, unchecked anger, undisciplined anger, anger that has not been submitted to the Spirit can be a dangerous, destructive force.
Jesus warned us about the destructive power of anger in his most famous sermon, what we call the Sermon on the Mount, where he lays out his vision for what life in the kingdom of God looks like when it is fully lived out. Jesus takes an entire section to address the topic of anger. He says, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.' But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Raka,' is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell." Maybe you've read that before and wondered why Jesus starts off talking about murder and then goes right into warnings about anger and name calling. I think we all can agree that's not nearly the same thing, but Jesus is making a much bigger point here. He's cutting right to the heart. Tim Mackey, who's a biblical scholar at the Bible Project, explains it this way.
Wait, so Jesus is equating anger and name-calling with murder?
He got your attention, didn't he?
Yeah, but obviously murdering someone is worse than just getting mad and calling someone a name.
Sure, but that's not his point. Jesus is provocatively showing how murder, anger, and verbal abuse, they're all surface manifestations of something that is way deeper.
Which is?
How much you value or don't value someone's existence.
I see. Like murder is the ultimate way of saying that someone's life doesn't matter.
And so is losing your temper or belittling someone. These all reveal an attitude of superiority and contempt for the life of another person.
Jesus is meeting us all right at the point where we make excuses for and minimize our relationship with anger. We think losing our temper now and then, or laying on our horn in traffic, or blurting out curse words at random people or objects is just blowing off steam. I haven't hurt anybody. It's not like I've killed someone. We're just having a loud disagreement. We say all these things to downplay our expressions of anger when they show up in us. But what we fail to see and what Jesus is trying to bring out into the light is this: undisciplined anger, rage, insults, put downs, name calling, basically everything you read on social media these days is not benign. It's not harmless. It comes from the same internal posture of the heart where things like murder and violence come from. Anger and contempt for a person is my heart aligning me with the same attitude that leads someone to dehumanize people and commit violence. We forget just how amazingly brilliant of a teacher Jesus is. Tim Mackey shows us something in this passage that you've probably never noticed before. Look at the pattern of those words of Jesus again. The first offense he mentions is murder, the worst of the worst. Then he moves to anger, and then he ends with a dismissive insult and name calling. So you can see Jesus moving from the worst offense to the lesser offenses. But look at the consequences or the penalties Jesus matches them up with. He starts with simple judgment. Then he moves to legal offenses. He brings in courts and jails and stuff like that. Then where does he end? Hell. Now let me make this clear. Jesus isn't referring to the hell you're probably picturing. Don't think of the devil and fire and demons. That word is the Greek word Gehenna, which refers to a literal valley where they dumped and burned trash. Nothing ever comes back from Gehenna. Everything there gets totally consumed and destroyed. But here's the point Jesus is making. He's moving down the scale of what we think is the worst expression of anger, while moving up the scale of how severe it is or the consequences of it. And it's not by accident. This is intentional because Jesus wants us to understand something about anger. So you've never killed anyone. Good for you. But have you ever placed another person made in the image of God into the you don't matter bucket? Ever considered someone dead to me? You're nothing. You don't matter? Jesus would say it's all the same thing. Your heart is already there. The moment you strip away their humanity, the image of God that exists within every person, your heart, your posture is already on the side of violence and murder. From Jesus' perspective, it's all in the same vein. It leads to the same place. The theologian Dallas Willard wrote, Jesus was a profoundly realistic teacher. He understood that anger is the first step towards contempt, and contempt is the first step toward murder. To cut off anger at its root is to deal with the spirit that leads to violence. You say, I thought we were just arguing, having a little spat, just a little bit of yelling and some childish name calling. But it's heavier than that. How we hold and express our anger matters. It can lead us somewhere if we're not careful.
So what I want us to do is to take a moment and to reflect on everything you've heard Jason say and Sierra say in the last few minutes. Are you holding on to anger? Is there anger inside of you towards somebody right now? And maybe you don't always feel it because the truth is you've just sort of written them off. You're just sort of done with them. Maybe it came about because of an injustice or a wrong or something that happened to you, or maybe it's conflict in a relationship that you can't get. It's really just rooted in you're not getting what you want from the other person. What I want us to do is to take a moment in this quiet and talk to God about all of that. God can handle honest talk about what you're so upset about. Ask Him to help you. If you don't know, ask Him, help me. Where's this anger coming from? Or maybe you ask Him to show, the danger of the kind of contempt that you're holding for the other person that Jesus talks about, and how it's causing you to see them through a lens of, they just don't matter. I can be done with them. Take a moment and ask God to help you see the real truth. Now, with all of that in mind, would you just take all of that anger and would you hold it up to God and say, God, I give this to you? He's big enough to handle what you have. And what you're really saying to him is, God, in this situation, I want your will to be done. What you're really saying to God is, God, I want what you want for me in this situation, in this relationship. Would you make clear to me what that is? And if it means taking some action that you haven't taken, then in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to pray for courage to do that. Or if it means letting something go that you've held on to, would you ask him to give you that ability as well? Just your will to be done, not mine. And if you know what God's will is, then commit to do it. Let's take a moment and do that right now. With our anger, if there's something you're calling us to do, give us the courage to do it. If you reveal something in us that needs to be healed, would you help us to be humble enough to seek the help we need to be healed? And if it turns and has turned toward contempt for another person, will you help us repent and begin to love and pray for them? We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
So for the rest of our time, I thought, why don't we just keep leaning towards the solution side of this whole anger thing? And I don't know how else to explain it other than in the ways that it best helps me. So I'll just share with you what has helped me over time with this whole issue. Like I said earlier, anger is definitely an emotion. You feel it, I feel it, we all feel it. There's nothing we can do about that. But anger is not a primary emotion. In fact, anger is what we call a secondary emotion. What does that mean? Well, it's simple. Whenever anger shows up in you and me, when I feel it in my body, when it courses through my mind with thoughts that just go over and over, those imaginary arguments that I have in my head, whatever it shows up as in me, whenever anger shows up, there's always something else underneath the anger. There's always another emotion that you feel. There's something else going on. The best way that I know to describe it is to think of it like an iceberg, right? We don't see too many icebergs in this area of the country, but let's look at it. We got that picture? There it is. When you see an iceberg, what do you see? Well, you only see what's above the water. That's why we say it's the tip of the iceberg. It always is the tip of the iceberg when you see an iceberg. An iceberg is this vast piece of ice that is floating in the water, but in order for it to float that way, there's usually a big majority of it sitting underneath the surface where you can't see. But that base down underneath the water is holding it up. It's causing it to show up above the waterline. It's giving it support to the tip of the iceberg. This is precisely how your anger and my anger shows up in our lives. See, whenever you're angry, that feeling that you feel, that people see, that you see, that comes out in all the outward stuff, the words, the actions, the flying off the handle, the punching a door, all of that stuff, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because there is another emotion inside of your body, inside of your brain, that is triggering all that. Anger is just what you see on the surface. But that root emotion is what we call the primary emotion, and that's something else. And one of the keys that you have to master if you ever want to master anger is you got to go beneath the surface. You got to dive down underneath to where the primary emotion lies. Bring that to the surface, deal with that before you can deal with your anger. Now, I'll be honest, that takes work. Sometimes it takes a lot of time to go through that, and sometimes it takes a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of reflection. But if you can do that, if you follow those principles that we already have learned together, right? It all ties together. If you learn how to slow down, just slow down. Don't react so quickly to that anger that you're feeling. Choose not to sin. But also don't let anger get its foothold in your life. Don't let it grow into a bitter grudge. You will have the ability to sit with that primary emotion, bring that to the surface, talk about it, deal with it, and you can find a resolution to the anger. Here's how I like to work with people on this issue. Usually, there's a lot of things going on when our anger shows up, and that's understandable. There's a lot of emotions that push anger to the surface. But what I have found is that if you boil all of those emotions down, you can bring them out in basically 3 major categories. And the 3 categories that fuel anger are these: hurt, fear, or frustration. Almost always it connects back to one of those 3 things. It's hurt, it's fear, it's frustration. Whenever I'm angry at somebody or something, it's coming usually. That's what's under the surface. It's one of those 3 emotions. I'm angry because I'm hurting. And this could be physical hurt even. I mean, how many of you know that when your body is not right, when you're sick, when you're in pain, some of you deal with chronic pain. When you're hurting in your body, your window of tolerance is about that big. You're easy to fly off the handle. Every little thing irritates you. And you just, everything bothers you. It's because you're hurting. Maybe not physically. Maybe it's emotional pain, psychological. Nobody likes to feel pain. It's uncomfortable. And so when I feel pain, I'm going to get angry much easier. Or what about fear? Are you just afraid? Here's a great way to illustrate this. You ever walked around a corner and one of your kids or one of your spouses decides to jump out and do one of those scary things around the corner and you jumped, right? Did it piss you off? Really? Can we just admit that, right? Oh my goodness, we get angry. In fact, some of you know this has happened. Somebody has jumped out of a corner and scared you and you bam, right? You come out fighting, fists start flying. Why is that? Well, it's because when we're afraid, okay? Whatever the thing is that's making us afraid, we want it gone. We want it to leave. And there's something within your body that reacts to that. And sometimes it comes out as a fight response. And so when we get scared, we fight and we push the thing away. And that's where the anger comes from. So it comes out as anger or aggression. But when you dive below the surface, you just have to say, well, truth is, I'm just scared and I just want that gone. And so I get angry. Or what about frustration? Now, you didn't know this, but we've already talked about frustration last week. That was all of last week's message was frustration. Because frustration, all it is this. I'm not getting what I want. I planned for something. I hoped for something. I expected something to happen. It's not happening. I'm frustrated. I'm just not getting what I want. I wanted to get to work on time, but now there's road construction and I'm late. Why are you frustrated? Because you didn't get what you planned for in this morning. That's why you're frustrated. I was planning on unplugging this weekend. I've been working all week. It's been a hard week. I deserve some downtime. I was wanting to just sit on the couch and just eat snacks and watch football. And then the pipe bursts in the bathroom. And now we got water flowing in and we got to clean that up and call the plumber and pay for it all. I'm not getting what I planned for. I'm not getting what I wanted. And now I'm frustrated. See, that's how anger comes to the surface. Hurt, fear, and frustration. I can almost guarantee that if you will first take all of James's advice to become slow to show your anger, and then while you are slowed down and while you're being reflective, you ask those questions of yourself. Questions like, what's my anger telling me right now? Where's that coming from? What is it that I'm really feeling below the surface that's leading me to get so angry? Am I hurt? Do a check-in. Is your body feeling okay? Is there a pain emotionally that you're suffering from right now? Am I in pain because of something I did? Am I in pain because somebody else did something to me, either right now or maybe way back in my past? Am I hurting? Or am I scared? Am I afraid of what might happen in the future? Am I afraid of something happening that, to be honest, I've seen it happen before, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen again. And I know because I've lived it, and now I'm just mad because I'm sick of history repeating itself. Or do I just hate the fact that I feel afraid? Am I mad at me? I should have been over this by now. It's been years. What's wrong with me? Why am I so afraid of this or her or him? And I'm mad at me because I'm afraid. Or am I just frustrated because things aren't going my way right now? Did I have some hopes? Did I have some dreams? Did I have some plans? And they're just not turning out like I thought they would. And there's people all around me that are just frustrating those plans. They're not cooperating. And my life is just so difficult. And the truth is, I am just frustrated. I'm telling you, if you can do that work, if you can put your finger on the source of your anger, and then if you could just stay with that for a little bit, stay with that feeling, and sit with your hurt, sit with your fear, or sit with your frustration, maybe by yourself, maybe with a trusted friend or trusted family member who cares and loves you, or maybe even a good counselor. If you can just sit there with that feeling, there is a way to resolve that hurt. There is an antidote to that fear. And there is a calm that will fill that frustration. And I'm telling you today, his name is Jesus. And I know, as soon as that came out of my mouth, some of you just kind of bristled. And I know why. It's because it sounds hyper-religious. Or, if you're honest, a little bit dismissive. Maybe just a tad naive. And I just want to hear you to hear me say this. If that's where you're at today, I don't blame you for feeling that way. If I had lived your life and had your experiences, and if I believed what you believe right now, sure, I'd probably feel the exact same way. So I don't blame anyone for feeling that way. It might feel a little bit trite. But I'm here to testify to you. The reason I can say those words in all honesty and seriousness is because I have experienced him. In the middle of my hurt, in the middle of my fears, in the middle of all of my frustrations, I have been with Jesus. I have sat with Jesus, and Jesus, he has sat with me. And when he does, he holds me. He holds all my emotions. And over time, he teaches me. And one of the things he has taught me over the years is, hey, it's okay to be angry. You can bring that right here. Bring that before me. I know what that's like. I've been there. I've felt that. I've done that. But as theologian Dallas Willard also says, he says, there is nothing that can be done with anger that cannot be done better without it. And that is something that I am learning as well. I don't have to let anger control me. I can bring all of me, all my hurt, all my fear, all my frustration. I can bring all of that to Jesus because I know he will lead me in a better way. He'll lead me to love. He'll lead me towards healing. Ultimately, he leads me the way of the cross. And so to end our time together, we're going to spend a little bit of time at the cross this morning through the meal of communion. Ed's going to lead us.